Hey guys, it's John here with another installment of Learn to Program. In the last video, we continued our discussion on data types and variables and learned a few new important concepts such as, string combining and typecasting. My hope is that you now have a basic understanding of working with variables, data types, and representing values as data types. So we've kind of seen what our computer programs can do in terms of math and basic output to our command prompt and some string manipulation and things like that. But that's really not all that exciting or particularly useful, especially when you consider some of the big scale applications that are out there that seem like they can do everything. So in this video, we'll kind of take a step further here, and we're going to introduce some basic logic and decision making to our programs. So in most of the computer programs that we will end up writing, we'll often encounter what are called conditional statements. And conditional statements are any statements that will be executed as long as a certain value or expression evaluates to true. So, all popular computer programming languages, make use of these conditional statements, and in most of them, they will implement it in the form of if statements. So, we'll do a little example here. I've got something written here in Python. So, I've created this Python program called Boolean.py, for lack of a better, name. So, what I've done is I've created this variable called money, and I've set it to the integer value of like 100,000 or something ridiculous. And then I've made an if statement here, which basically says if money is greater than 100, then we're going to print money, print this sentence, money in the bank. So, it looks like a pretty straightforward concept, and we'll just kind of go over some of the intricacies rather of it. So, basically the if keyword in Python tells the computer that an expression is to follow. And if this expression evaluates to true, then it will execute all of the code that follows the if statement. So you can see that we kind of terminate the expression with a colon here. And then any code that's indented underneath this if statement will be executed as long as this expression, in this case money greater than 100, evaluates to true. So we're going to go ahead and give this a run and see what happens. So we'll do our Python Boolean.py, and of course we get a nice little sentence here saying money in the bank. That's to be expected. This certainly makes a lot of sense to us when we've got a great big value of 100,000. Well, if that value is greater than 100, then print out that statement. So if the expression is false, this money greater than 100 is false, it will actually just go and ignore any lines that are underneath that are indented. So we'll do an example. Let's say I've only got $1, so we'll get rid of that, and then we'll try running this again. And of course, nothing happens because, this expression evaluated to false, so then the program will then just go ahead and ignore every indented line beneath the if statement. So let's do a couple more examples here and maybe get some additional complications in here. So, I don't know, maybe we'll try something a little silly. So I'm going to create a variable here called, is computer handsome? Maybe we'll set that to true. Of course, that's a Boolean value. We talked a little bit about Boolean values a couple of videos ago, so hopefully that's not too far out of the back of your mind there. So, and then maybe I'll create an if statement here saying something like, if the computer is handsome. And you'll notice that I've kind of got a double equals sign here as opposed to a single equals sign. So this is a bit of just a tricky thing that you'll always have to be aware of. I'll talk about that more in a couple of minutes here, but just keep in mind I'm using two equal signs, not one here. So that is my if statement, and then maybe our computer is kind of conceited and narcissistic, so we'll say something like, yeah, I thought so. And then maybe underneath, maybe he's a pretty complimentary guy as well, so we'll say, you're pretty cute too. And then just for, another little statement down here, maybe I'll say something like print, this is not part of the if statement. So before we actually go ahead and run this, we'll just take we'll kind of think about this logically and go through and try to imagine how the computer will think about this. So, we've set this value to equal true, and then we've got an if statement with a couple of print statements underneath. So in this particular if statement, the expression is is computer handsome, the variable, is that equal to true? And in this case, of course, it is. So if it does evaluate to true, we can expect that the computer will print out both of these statements to the command prompt. Now this print statement down here is actually not indented. So this is not part of, this if statement up here at all. So no matter what happens, no matter if this expression evaluated to true or false, this final print statement down here will always be executed. So let's go ahead and verify that when we run it. And of course it prints everything out just as we expected it to. And then just for clarity, we'll try making this expression false. And we'll run it again. And of course it completely ignores these statements underneath the if statement that are indented because this expression evaluated to false. But again, this is not part of any if statement, so it will always be executed no matter what. So I've got a bit of a table here set up that kind of explains all the operators you can do in truth testing. Specifically, you'll find a lot of these will be used in if statements. So I mentioned this double equal sign already, and you will always use this double equal sign in your if statements to test for equality. So if you have something like variable double equal sign 2, the if statement will then go ahead and check if the variable is equal to 2. So most of these are pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I can kind of go down here and it's pretty easy to just read and understand that these are likely pretty familiar to you. So of course this is greater than, less than, this is greater than or equal to, and this is less than or equal to. And then some of these other ones down here are actually keywords in Python as well. So this in, you probably won't be using this one too much yet, but it's certainly valuable for testing strings. Let's say if you want to find out if a word is in a sentence, you can say, if the is in the rabbit hopped, then it would certainly evaluate to true. But we'll get more into this in operator later. And these other ones are just kind of more Boolean logic things. So this AND operator will evaluate to true if both values before and after the AND operator are true. If one of them is false or both of them are false, then the whole thing is false no matter what. And this OR operator is kind of the opposite of that, so it's true if either value before or after the OR operator is true. So one of them could be false, it doesn't matter, as long as one of them is true, then that will evaluate to true. And then not is simply just a negation, so if something evaluates to true, then not, whatever that thing is, will evaluate to false, and vice versa. So now we'll kind of introduce some more logic pertaining to if statements. So I'm going to introduce a couple of additional keywords here. This might be a bit of a long-winded example here, but let me just create a variable here called age, and maybe I'll set that to, I don't know, 0 for now or something. And then we're going to create a sequence of if statements that are all part of the same set. So first I'll say something like, if age is less than or equal to 0, we'll go ahead and print not born yet. And then we're going to introduce a keyword here called elif. And I'm just going to quickly type all these elif statements out, and then I'll talk about them. So just bear with me here. So I'll do something like elif age greater than 0, and there's that AND operator we just talked about. And age, less than or equal to 20. Maybe we'll print out you're quite young. And then so on and so forth. We'll just kind of go through the exhaustive list of possible ages, I guess, if you will. So we'll do something like, else if the age is greater than 20 and the age is less than or equal to 40, maybe we'll print out something like, you're in your prime, maybe, I don't know. And then maybe one final else if or elif statement we'll do like, if age is greater than 40 and age is less than or equal to 60, we'll print, I don't know, you're in the midst of your best career years or something. And then we'll do a final keyword here called else. So this is a kind of catch-all thing that we'll talk about in a second. Maybe we'll print out, we'll print out retirement baby. So as you can see, elif is a pretty useful keyword. If I don't know, maybe you kind of inferred this. It's pretty easy to figure out, but it's a very useful keyword which allows you to cover additional cases. And then the else keyword that we have at the bottom is a catch-all statement that will always be executed if every other part of the if statement is false. So if this first expression fails, then it'll skip this print not born yet and it'll go right on to the next thing, and this elif, so it'll go and do this one, and if that returns false, it'll again go and skip this, and then it'll go on to the next statement. And then if this returns true, it will actually go ahead and execute this statement, and then it'll go ahead and skip all the other statements in this particular set of if statements. Of course, if every single one of these if or elif statements returned false, then finally this else statement would get executed. It's sort of a catch-all. If everything else fails, do this. So this is a very important thing to remember. As soon as one of the if, elif, or else clause is true and executed, the program will skip the remainder of the clauses. And of course, maybe I wanted to start a new if statement with a bunch of more elif, etc. That's a completely different set. We can kind of treat this as one set of if statements, and no matter what happens in this one, this will be treated as a new set, and it'll start right at the beginning of the if. So just something important to keep in mind. So that pretty much covers the basics of Boolean logic and if statements. So maybe I'll pop open a little practice exercise here. So I've kind of put together a little practice problem if you'd like to try your hand at using Boolean logic and if statements and things like that. So you can go ahead and maybe pause the video and read through this little exercise rather, if you want, to try it out. So yeah, that covers pretty much everything in this video, so feel free to give me some feedback on what else you'd kind of like to see for practice problems and things. So thanks very much, and see you next time.